Uh, Thank you. To arrive here today, I had to go the long way around. It required living out of a Toyota Corolla in the downtown campground in Fairbanks, Alaska. To arrive here today, it took me 16 years, 7 months, and 9 days. I'm an anthropologist. That means I'm interested in knowing everything I can about you and I. I'm interested in knowing how we got here, where we're going, and why we've been here. I'm also an explorer. That means I conduct journeys to isolated places around the globe in search of geographic and scientific knowledge. We humans have been consumed with the culture of contest since we crawled down out of the trees. It probably started with a drought. We were concerned on how we were going to go find a secure water source. And we had to compete with others to get to that source and secure it before they did. As we started to venture away from our known boundaries, we started to map the globe. We started to write down our thoughts. We wanted to find out what was beyond. That's probably why Marco Polo went east. Then government started paying explorers to go on expeditions to find new routes to the resources to come back and fill the treasure troves. That's probably why Columbus decided to go west in search of India. What explorers have been doing is they tried to go find the last frontiers. This was especially true in the 19th and early 20th century. They went looking for the last frontiers, not just to locate them and put them on the map, but also to create financial security for themselves via book tours, lecture tours. But what they had to be careful about was if they announced their objectives and their plans too soon, other explorers would sneak past them in the dark of the night. Like Scott, the British explorer Scott, who arrived to the South Pole only to determine that Norwegian Amundsen had already put the flag there and beat him to the prize. As we started and continued to fill in all the blanks of the map and to try to distinguish ourselves from others, it became the culture of contest that we wanted to distinguish ourselves by being the first at something. And after Hillary and Tenzing summited Mount Everest, the way to distinguish yourself on Mount Everest has become somewhat amusing. The first in the winter, the first solo, the youngest, the oldest, the first couple, the first married couple, the first brothers, the first three brothers to summit on the same day. It goes on and on and on, the list. Some people take distinguishing themselves to the extreme. It's almost beyond logic. Like my friend Martin Strel from Slovenia. He is a marathon swimmer and he swims rivers. He swam the entire length of the Amazon River. My other friend, Brit, Ed Stafford. Ed walked for 2.5 years along the Amazon River to become the first person to ever walk along the Amazon River. These people do these things. It's very noble. They challenge the body, both mentally and physically, to the extremes. Then there are those that are what I consider the creative attention seekers. They do it for either themselves or for a charity, which is a noble cause. Like the guy last month who climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, the highest mountain on the African continent, with a stuffed tiger on his back. I hope he raised a lot of funds for his charity. There's no better way than to see an example of the creative attention seekers than the Monty Python show. And they do a wonderful fictional account of the first international hairdressers expedition to Mount Everest. And instead of laying out base camps like you have to do to climb such a mountain. Instead of doing that, they set up hair salons along the way. And then there's no discussion of exploration that cannot mention the adventurers. The adventurers are those who engage in enterprising endeavors for profit. And they are the ones I would assume you most definitely know. They're the folks on D-Max and Discovery Channel. They live off of scorpions and their bodily fluids. And they adventure, but they are not explorers. For me, exploration began 16 years ago, 7 months, and 9 days to this very day. I was sitting on a deck on an apartment building, the 6th floor in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, in the United States. I had just turned over to my mother the bedside vigil that we were holding 24 hours, 24/7 at the time, for my father, who was fighting a losing battle with lung cancer. And as I saw his life slipping away, I contemplated what it was going to be like when I got to that point. A few days prior, I was watching a National Geographic documentary about Colonel Norman Vaughan. Norman was the last remaining member of Admiral Byrd's 1928-1930 expedition to Antarctica. Admiral Byrd wanted to be the first person to fly over the South Pole, and in order to do so, Norman, with 6 other members of a geological team, had to be between the coast and halfway to the pole with a dog sled team in case Admiral Byrd failed and had to be saved. In appreciation for the work and dedication that Norman did, Admiral Byrd named a mountain in Antarctica for Norman, and at age 88, Norman decided, well, it's time to go climb my mountain. It came with calamities. He almost lost his life. They crashed an airplane to begin with. They had to come back. It was a financial disaster. Upon reaching the top of his mountain, Mount Vaughan, Norman proclaimed to young and old, dream big and dare to fail. That was the first time I ever heard that motto. And I decided right then and there, after my father passed away, that when I get to that point, I want to have so many exciting adventures to talk about and think about as I lay in a hospital bed. I want it to go by like one big adventure movie. And so I snapped. I completely just said, that's it. I quit my job in the hotel industry. I dusted off my anthropology degree from college. I sold everything I owned, and I only had $6,000 US, which to a lot of people it's a lot of money, but it's really not. I cashed in my frequent flyer points, and I went as far south as the points redemption would take me from the United States to Mexico. In Mexico, I got on buses and I traveled all the way down to the Panama Canal because I'd never seen the Panama Canal. I went all the way down, turned around, went all the way back to the United States. I then decided I would travel all the way by public transportation to Tierra del Fuego, to the tip of South America. I crossed every land border in every country of South America, and I came back, but I came back not alone. Along the way, I met an adventuresome young lady from Austria. She liked to travel. She spoke many languages. That was extremely helpful in Latin American countries. I convinced a radio network to accept phone calls from me for free, and I would call in once a week and I would tell them what I did the week before. That allowed me to gain sponsors. The radio network didn't pay me. They would allow the sponsors to be plugged. I would get free gear. I would get cash. And so I was an explorer. Over the years, the adventures have now filled 2 books. I've been to 100 countries. I've seen a lot. I've done a lot. But I kept getting the questions from my family and friends. Why? Why Mexico? Why South America? When are you going to get a real job? And so I said, I've got an obligation. I've got to put some meaning into what I'm doing. I've got to get some respect for these journeys I did. So I decided I was going to follow the famous Lewis and Clark Trail across the United States. And so the Austrian and I, we got in an old Toyota Corolla, and we followed it all the way across. But a few weeks into the deal, it all fell apart. The financial sponsor pulled the plug. My dear Mama Myrtle, she turned sick. Make matters worse, the Austrian was told by the U.S. Immigration Department that her tourist visa was no longer valid, and that if she didn't leave the country within 2 weeks, they were going to put her in prison. Well, we got to the Pacific coast. Things weren't looking good, not going according to plan, so we said, well, let's go to Alaska. So we headed up to Alaska, got to Fairbanks, and we were broke. We didn't have any more money. We lived off of potatoes, boiled potatoes for a month, living in a tent in the campground. And one day, somebody, a stranger, said, well, here are 2 tickets to the Alaska State Fair. So we went to the fair. And we were walking along the stalls, and we came across this one particular one, and it was some posters on the curtains and a couple of books laying around. And I walked over and I said, I wonder what this is all about. And all of a sudden, the curtains open up in the back, and out steps Colonel Norman Vaughan. Huh? I said, man alive, this is my personal hero. I'm going to sit here for 2 days, and I did, and I learned everything I could from Norman. He told me about how he had moved to Alaska at age 68 with $100 in his pocket. He told me how he went on to participate in the Iditarod dog sled race 13 times. He told me how he found love and happiness that he'd been searching for his entire life. He told me, no matter how frustrated I was, to always remember that dreamers have to dare to fail. Well, the Austrian and I, we finally did get out of that campground in Fairbanks. We went on to travel. I traveled the globe over and over. But somewhere along the way, I got off message. I started to say, I'm not distinguishing myself enough. I need to come up with a plan. So I came up with this brilliant idea that I would walk across the African continent. I found a route I can convince myself nobody had ever walked it before. And so I got all my gear together. A lot of sponsors by now. Ton of stuff. Couldn't believe I was going to be able to walk with it. But one day, I'm walking along, and the locals, I start talking to them, and I'm saying, these people are not walking to be first or to be in a contest with someone. They're doing it for survival. They have to do this to live. And then it was right then and there that I realized I'm not distinguishing myself from other explorers. I'm becoming just like they are. And so I said to myself, I've got to get back to the 16, 7, 9 reason that I started, and it's for the memories. It's all about the memories. And now, at this point in my life, I focus on the joyous memories. Like the other night, I'm sitting there with my 7-year-old daughter, Panama. And she looks up at me and she says, Papa, tell me about Africa. Whether you explore Asia or Africa or the back streets of Innsbruck, explore with your eyes wide open. Along the way, you're going to inspire yourself, and you might just inspire others. Live your dreams. This is the ticket you've got. Live your dreams. And as you do it, I wish you all success in chasing down your memories one memory at a time. Dream big, dare to fail, and live beyond a culture of contest. Thank you so much.